Okay, here we are with no listeners, which is awesome. We'll have some soon, but we're asked to pose for some nice photos. So look into the camera and smile together so that Ryan and Tyann and Lisa, whoever's helping us, can get some snapshots of us. So
Okay.
Okay, I don't know how we look because I'm looking in the camera rather than at us.
All right, hopefully good enough.
Yeah, so, okay, great. Hopefully that worked.
Right.
And Dwight.
And that's it for the day. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's the end of today's show. So short and sweet. But I'm very excited. Let's see if we can introduce it. As Lisa tells us to do it, is February 25th, 3 p.m. in California. We're about to get started. We have some wonderful feedback from last time. By the way, we have 1,500 people downloaded our
That's exciting.
Yeah, and that's better numbers than a lot of the previous ones here. There's a phone here I will pick up and take. Hello. Oh yeah, we're broadcasting live right now, Tyann. Yeah, so I thank you for calling. I figured out how to get the camera working this time. You can't see us live? Well, you're not logged on. Dwight Slawback is, Dan Prine is.
Can you guys see us and hear us okay? Thanks, Dan.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead. Thanks, Diane. I hope you can jump on board with us. Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, that was Tyann. What's your last name?
I'm blinking
Trong.
right now. I'm blinking.
Okay, it's not Trong or something?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Who's helping us from Oklahoma, and she's going to be, Lisa's in a creative writing class at Stanford now.
Yeah.
And so Tyann is there to kind of back us up.
And Dan gave us a thumbs up that he's on and can see us and hear us. Great, thanks.
Oh, great, thank you. And so we're going to like Dan. We'll triple like Dan. I don't know if likes are good, but he has 3 likes. And
okay, great.
Jan,
we got some feedback.
Yeah. Oh, here, Tyann. Yes,
okay.
You got on. Great, Tyann. Thank you. And Jan Prinz can hear and see you loud and clear. Well, that's great. Well, we'll
wait. You were going to announce us, so you said the date and the time.
Oh yeah, and we have. I had my hike with my Sunday group this morning. We had, I'd say, 8 or 10 people. The hikes have become increasingly popular. And I have some really fancy professional quality recording gear now with 3 lapel mics, and this week I'll get a 4th lapel mic. So we're able to record stuff, live work on the Sunday hikes, and hope to be able to bring you some of that wonderful live work. It was great. We went 8.5 miles today and hiked up the equivalent of 142 flights of stairs. So if I fall asleep or pass out, you'll know it's not because it's boring. You'll know just that the old guy is being pressed to his elderly limit. But I had anticipated that it would be great working with you, Jill, and I was wrong. No, it was fantastic. It exceeded my expectations in the best way I can put it. And we have some beautiful feedback from people who are listening, is that you're crisp in your answers, you're clear, you're lucid, you're helpful, and also very, very compassionate. You keep things simple and practical, and it's just a pleasure to be working with you. And I'll read one. You remember that a couple from Australia called with what at first looked like a pretty challenging communication problem. And Joe was saying we can do more communication issues in today's broadcast if that interests you. They had their daughter was going to go to some kind of rock concert with a fellow who's 18 and she's 16, and they wanted to make sure that that the daughter would be protected, like she'd be picked up by an adult and dropped off by an adult, because there's the drinking age there in Australia is 18, and they didn't want their daughter to get into any kind of dangerous situation, which is good parenting. But when they tried to communicate with this fellow about it, he got kind of uppity and critical of them, and they defended themselves and had asked, how could we have responded more effectively? And then you, Jill, came up with a really awesome response, which I thought was just terrific. And then Mel from Australia emailed us and said, "Oh, wow, David, we were super impressed with the responses given by both Jill and yourself on the Facebook Live show in regards to how we could have interacted differently with our daughter's boyfriend." There were several points mentioned and a few positive ways to frame his outrage that we had not yet considered. Your skills are awe-inspiring, and I agree with that so much. But, when you model stuff, to me, it's awe-inspiring. But I'll take some credit for it myself, because I had to teach myself these things from a pretty lame beginning and have improved a lot over the years. And she's finishing saying, "We're so very thankful for the careful consideration you gave to our question. We'll continue to practice these skills, and hopefully we will get an opportunity to reconnect with the boyfriend. At the moment, he has no desire to speak to us. And we're spreading the word about you here in Australia to friends and families. Thank you kindly, Mel." So thank you for that, Mel. And if all of you will spread the word to your friends and family and colleagues, and get them to watch the Sunday broadcast, we would greatly appreciate it. See if we can build up our audience. One other thing I wanted to mention, I just recorded with Fabrice. I also have the Facebook. No, not the Facebook. This is the Facebook.
Right.
I'm David, and this is Jill.
The free podcast, right?
Yeah, the Feeling Good podcast. And after the Tuesday group at Stanford, Fabrice came over and we recorded some practice, the intimacy exercise I've developed, both how to respond to the difficult, critical patient, if you're a therapist, as well as how to respond to criticisms from friends and family members. And Jacob Towery was kind of the guest expert, and then two of the so-called students are actually very sophisticated community therapists, but they come for ongoing training and personal work to the Tuesday group, and they volunteered. And so if you're interested in learning, again, how to learn the 5 secrets, what is an exercise you could do with a friend or family member to get really good at the 5 secrets, watch for that podcast. It should probably be released, if my timing is correct, probably next Monday, and I'm almost certain of that. And also, if you go to www.feelinggood.com, to any page, there's a widget in the upper right-hand corner of every page that you can put your email address in there, and then you'll get notifications for all of the Feeling Good podcasts, the Feeling Good blogs, all kinds of happenings. Did you get any signups yet for any of your...
We've had a few.
A few.
Yeah.
Well, this time, for today's broadcast, I just promoted our 20th of May thing.
Great.
Decided to focus. And
sure.
Why would people who are watching right now want to go and sign up? And on my website, yesterday, go to the Feeling Good blog of yesterday, and there you'll see the link to this one-day workshop that Jill and David are going to give on May 20th. Why might a therapist have some interest in attending that, or a general public person if they wanted to sneak in?
If a therapist would be interested, if they wanted to learn more about the kind of therapy that we do, if they wanted to improve their therapy skills in, I would say, using measurement with their patients, connecting with difficult to connect with patients, improving their empathy skills, right? Learning this kind of new way that we do what's called paradoxical agenda setting, reducing resistance, boosting motivation, as well as learning some tools to help their patients. And there's one final reason.
Well, one big bonus.
The biggest.
Yes. If you're
Drum roll.
How many of you feel?
If you not only want to help your patients, but you also
help yourself, because you sometimes feel anxious, insecure, depressed, guilty, ashamed, feeling you're not as good as you should be. You get self-critical. That happens to all of us. And what are we going to do with that in the afternoon, Jill?
We are going to have people use their own personal examples, their own feelings, and our goal is to help therapists heal themselves.
That's right. And the promise, and this seems ridiculously grandiose.
I'll let you say that.
Is that I promise that we will bring at least 60% of the audience in the afternoon on May 20th to a state of euphoric spiritual enlightenment. All of your fears and sorrows and guilt and shame and insecurities will vanish, and you'll become ecstatic, along with, I might say, the death of your ego, what the Buddhists call the great death. And we have a way of inducing that very, very quickly in those who are interested. So
sounds good.
Is that too modest?
Just a tad, right?
Okay. Now, a couple other things. Rob, who I think is wonderful. This is Rob from Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I love the show, David. I can't wait for the next episode. I always get so many pearls of wisdom from your podcast. I don't know if that was our show or maybe that was the Feeling Good
I think so.
podcast. Whatever.
I don't know.
Anyway, we'll take it.
I remember that he was here last time.
We'll take it. Now, should we dive into some
5 secrets
cool questions people have?
So let me just see. It looks like a couple people might have posted some questions here.
Oh, already,
so maybe
yeah.
we should take a look at that.
Yeah.
I see Dan posted a question that said, would you ever skip paradoxical agenda setting and go straight to methods?
Yes, I do it all the time and nearly always get burned when I do it. But occasionally you'll have a really motivated client and you don't need to melt away the resistance. You can go right into the methods and it works. Now, I'll tell you how I got burned on that just recently. I'll keep it anonymous, but there was a fellow who came twice to our Sunday hike and asked to work on a conflict with his son. He got mad at his son about his son, he wanted his son to do more around the house was the essence of it. And then a conflict with his boss. He felt kind of put down in a public meeting with his boss. And we went right into methods and he just blew it out of the park. He saw exactly how to communicate differently with his son, went back, did it, developed a beautiful relationship with his son. It worked fantastic with his boss. So he asked, well, could he do a session on how to use the 5 secrets with his wife? And so we actually recorded it. Helen was, did I tell you this?
Yes, you did. You mentioned it.
Did I mention on the podcast? Or?
You mentioned it last week here. That just
on
specifically,
this show.
I believe so.
Oh, well, I won't.
That it didn't go well, but then you had some great idea afterwards about.
Well,
right?
yeah, because we didn't do agenda setting. I
Right.
thought he wanted to improve the relationship with his wife.
Right.
Just like he had with his son
Right.
and his boss.
Right.
But it turned out he was very angry
Right.
and we hadn't empathized enough. We hadn't seen, we just, here's how to fix it. And he started fighting us.
Yeah.
And so the session was a total failure. And then I found out on today's hike that afterwards he had all of these insights and he started using I feel statements with his wife. And then he went home this last weekend and the house was all cleaned up, and and so he was really on a high. But
yeah, I think in answer to that question, I think it's Dan. Sometimes we do, we're short on time, and we really want to jump into methods and be helpful, and sometimes it works, right? I mean, there are times you have an incredibly motivated patient, and they're ready to work, and it works. I make it a habit of not doing that simply because I'd rather just take the time and do the agenda setting and sort of know that I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's and make the most of the methods, right? Also because in my experience, depends on the patient, but for example, with patients with depression, my experience is that paradoxical agenda setting, which means kind of siding with the voice of the patient's resistance and positively reframing the patient's symptoms, can have a mood elevating effect, right? So,
absolutely.
So when you're working with someone who's depressed and you actually take time to positively reframe their symptoms before reducing their symptoms, they're already kind of halfway there. So I feel like it is almost a method in and of itself.
And probably shouldn't be skipped because years ago I had this young woman in my group. I think
I know the story. No, you haven't told it here.
And she wanted to work on a problem with her because she has these 2 young sons, and she was pretty sure one of them was on the road to becoming a psychopathic serial killer because one of the sons was really friendly and nice and the other was a little bit more aggressive.
Right.
And so I knew this person to be exceptionally motivated. And so she said in the Tuesday group, can I do some work tonight on my relationship with my sons. And so we did, and it was fantastic. But I skipped agenda setting because I knew how motivated she was, and it was a very successful evening. And one of the sons is now in federal prison, but that's beside the point. But at the end, she said, "My gosh, it was a great experience, but I really missed the agenda setting. I would have enjoyed that experience." I said, "You're right. We should do that with every patient at every session, because it's such a fabulous, helpful thing for people." And of course, you were that person.
Right.
You want to
that was me.
Say what that was like for you, and because that caused a huge shift in team therapy.
I mean, what I felt, so it was David's referring to me. It was me who thought, because my son, who was, I don't know, maybe 8 at the time, was less than empathic. I was worried he was, going to be a serial killer or something silly like that. But anyway, the session was very helpful. I remember, it was somewhat kind of 5 secrets training. It was also self-acceptance. It was also acceptance of him, et cetera, et cetera. And the methods were very useful. I remember feeling kind of a little bit less connected than I would have liked. In other words, the empathy piece was there, but you hadn't spent any time basically positively reframing my worry or my guilt or my concerns, which probably would have been this really nice reframe around, that I care about my son or that I want to have a close relationship with him. And so I just sort of felt like there was a little bit missing.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and shared that with you, and then you thought, oh, well, maybe we should do this with all our patients, even the ones that seem motivated, right?
Yeah. And that was like a breakthrough in team. And one thing I love about team and working with Jill and the other people in our groups is we get, breakthrough insights all the time. In fact, that whole thing of depression being addiction, a lot of people are popping on that, like popcorn.
Yeah.
It's really, that's been opening up. And then I have another new one. Insight that I'll keep it general and brief because we're supposed to be doing other things, but I was working with a fellow who had this tyrannical voice in his brain every morning for 10 years saying, you're a failure. You don't know this, right?
No.
You're an idiot. And, actually we were just friends having pizza, and he was telling me about this. And then I said, well, when you say you're a failure, what do you mean? And he was saying, well, my career isn't, up to what I'd want it to be, and my relationship with my girlfriend is, on the rocks half the time. We argue. And when I was growing up, I told myself I wouldn't have a relationship like my parents. I was going to find someone I really loved and cared about. And I just feel like I'm a failure. And so we were going through some cognitive techniques. Let's be specific. Let's define terms. A little positive reframing, and things like that. And we're making a little headway, but he was stuck, as so many people are stuck. And then I just had the inclination, like, this is such a nice guy. Why does he have this bully voice in his brain every morning? Because what he was saying is by evening he works his way out of it through meditation, through exercise, maybe by writing down his negative thoughts, and then every morning he wakes up and there it is, ripping into him again. It's kind of sad for 10 years, right? And he's really a very sophisticated, smart, highly trained guy, MBA, really kind of a cool career, but he's a free spirit. He's not following the societal norms. You might say he's an inventor, he's doing his own thing. And I said, where's his voice come from? Why is this happening? Usually I don't ask the why.
Yeah, the why, right.
Because so many people, like Ellis called them whiners. Why am I like this? Well, let's talk about my childhood. I'm a victim and all of this. But then he really said, actually, I think it's the voice of my father. And he said, I've really been in competition with my father ever since I've been a little boy. And it's kind of like these two worldviews. Father represents the conservative worldview, and then he represents the more liberal, do your own thing. But the father is your worth equals your achievements, and your achievements have to be great. And as we talked about that, and then he suddenly thought, gosh, I could make peace with my father. I don't need to keep battling him. And he wasn't always wrong. And I could use 5 secrets with him, and kind of a peacefulness came in, and he says, now for the last several weeks that voice hasn't been there. And I thought, well, that's a kind of a cool, it sounds kind of like psychodynamic therapy or some such thing. But
I wonder if that would come out. I was thinking, like, if you were doing a positive reframe, if you were thinking, what are all the good reasons to keep criticizing yourself?
Yeah,
I've had that come out with a patient where they say, or sometimes it does come out that, like, whose voice is that? And they say, well, it sounds a lot like my father. Who was critical of you like that? Oh, my mother. And then in the positive reframing, sometimes I would suggest, well, perhaps then criticizing yourself is a way of kind of keeping your mother's spirit alive, or a way of keeping your mother with you, or a way of being obedient to your mother, despite the fact that you're really not. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, there's another great energy, potential energy source.
There's one other question here, David. I don't know if you want to answer up here on the screen. I'm interested in the issue of fear of rejection. Among other things. Do you want to say a little about that?
I'll say a few things. You can say a few things. I have written a book about this called Intimate Connections, and it's somewhat superficial, but it has helped a lot of people. A lot of people have come up to me in workshops and say, I'm married because of your book. Thank you, David. And it's really about how to hustle and how to play the dating game. It's not about how to get really close to people. For that, you have to get my book, Feeling Good Together.
Right.
But it will show you how to get a lot of people chasing after you and how to overcome the fear of rejection. And I'll only mention two basic themes that you can learn about in that book, Intimate Connections. It's a little mass market paperback you can pick up on Amazon if you're lonely or having dating issues. I love the topic because 60% of my patients when I was in clinical practice were not in intimate relationships. They'd been rejected or divorced and couldn't get back into the dating game, or they'd never gotten into it in the first place. And the first part of the book is on the idea that to overcome your fear of being alone. And that I always told my patients, I will not show you how to hustle and flirt and get people chasing after you until you no longer need people. Like you have to learn to be happy with yourself. Because of the rule, people only want what they can't get. They never want what they can get. And so if you're afraid of rejection, then you'll be needy, and then you're what the person can get, and then they're forced to reject you.
Right. And if you're chasing someone, they'll run away, right?
Yeah, you force them to run away. So that's one of the themes in that book that might be helpful to you. And then the other is that rejection could never upset a human being. Only a wrong thought about rejection. And by a wrong thought, I mean a distorted thought, like, oh, this proves that I'm a loser, or I could never be happy without Trisha's love or Bob's love or whatever, and
I'll never find someone as good again.
That
I'm effective.
And it's all my fault. And this will always happen to me. That type of thing. But there's a lot of.
And then you also, one other thing, this seems to be one of your favorites too, though, is having people go out and do rejection practice, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. And I did that when I was a medical student. And then I learned later that the great Albert Ellis in New York did the same thing. Yeah. But I used to get rejected all the time because nobody taught me the ropes when I was growing up. I was a minister's son, and my mother said that women are looking for a very nice, sincere fellow. So I was nice and sincere, and I got rejected 100% of the time, sadly. But there was this kid living in the garage behind this house that I was renting with some other people. And I think we let him rent it for free or something because he was poor. But his name was Jeff Evans, and I've been trying to find him. This was like 40 years ago. He's probably still alive here somewhere. And he called himself Spider. And he was like about 18 or 19, and he was a real good-looking guy, and he was a drummer. But he was cripplingly shy, and I was kind of cripplingly a loser, and we were both terrified of rejection. So once I decided to spend 2 weeks and not go to any of my medical school classes, and Spider and I just decided to go out and get as many rejections as we could.
Right. So like this part is key. The goal isn't to go out and get a date, right? The goal isn't to go out and like find the woman of your dreams. The goal is actually go out and ask a bunch of women out and be totally fine getting rejected, right? Like collect rejection, right?
Exactly.
Which is, such a strange idea, but paradoxically so freeing, right?
Yeah. And we both did about 10 a day. We would go out 6-8 hours a day in Palo Alto or go up to San Francisco. And then we would take turns. I would say, go get rejected by her.
Right.
He'd go up and say, oh, my name is Spider. Or, could I have your phone number? And then get a big rejection.
Right.
And then I did the same thing. And I was very nice and sincere. And we both had 100% rejection rates, but kind of got over the fear of rejection. And the great Albert Ellis in New York did the same thing. Yeah. He's no longer alive, but it was just coincidence that he did the same thing. But he went to approach in 2 weeks 200 women in New York and asked them out, and he said all but one just rejected him. Only one of them accepted a date with him, and then she didn't show up. But he said he got over his fear of rejection, and then he became quite a notorious womanizer, I guess is the best way to say it. And he wrote a column for Playboy magazine or one of those on sexual issues and love life.
So one thing I'll say though is, as a therapist, if the person who wrote the question, I think, is a therapist saying, how do I help my patients with this? In fact, I mean, we do, generally it's patients with social anxiety that struggle with this, but it could be anything. But I've taken my patients out of the office to kind of like a busy downtown area, and I've done other kinds of exposure with them, shame attacking exercises, even, if they're super anxious, smile and hello, asking people for directions, asking questions about menus at restaurants. And then you can also say, now I want you to start collecting rejections. So I want you to go ahead and, as you did with your friend, right? You as a therapist can take your patient out of the office and say, go ask this person out, go ask that person out. Again, with proper agenda setting, a good relationship with your patient, right? You can kind of be their wingman.
Oh yeah, and then I also had flirting training, and then I met this guy named Michael. In my book, I disguised him as Bill because I couldn't look him up either and get permission, but he was Palo Alto's most notorious, should I say this, womanizer?
I don't know. I'm not the police here, I don't know.
Politically incorrect, but he lived with his mother. He worked part-time at Bloomingdale's in the men's department and rode around on a motor scooter. But let's just say he was a sex magnet. And women were attracted to him to a degree that is kind of really almost hard to believe. And we kind of set up this odd friendship. We were so different. And he decided to kind of show me the ropes. And he taught me, and then I spent like 2 months not going to medical school classes. but
don't follow these instructions.
But it was one of the most amazing experiences in my life. And he kind of showed me how it works. And that's one of the reasons, my love life went from rags to riches to a degree I didn't ever even think was possible.
To be clear, like to have your back here, it's not the idea of womanizing that we're trying to teach our patients. It's the idea of not being afraid of being rejected and being willing to collect rejections, to put yourself out there,
but also how to put yourself out there in an appealing way.
Sure, absolutely.
Will be effective.
Which is again, I'm not worried about rejection kind of way.
Oh yeah, he wasn't at all. He wasn't at all worried about rejection. I found there was a lot to learn, and then that's why I wrote the book and about connections. And I learned more on the street from my friend Michael than I would have if I'd been going to my medical school classes. And then later, when I was in therapy and I had someone, I can't get into the dating scene, I'm rejected all the time, or I'm too cripplingly shy. I say, do I have good news
let me show you.
Yeah, we're going to have a mind-blowing experience here. And I just, that was my favorite thing to treat during my career. So have we done this one yet?
Let's see. This would lead us into 5 secrets. Should we move in that direction? So this person wrote, Dear Dr. Burns and Fabrice, thank you for the podcasts. I'm practicing the 5 secrets on strangers and acquaintances, hoping to tackle a big conflict. And the question is, how does one, quote, see the other person's truth when they disagree with them from a values base? So seeing someone's truth would be disarming, right? We talk about that.
Yeah.
So should I read more about it? So he says, a friend started expressing anger towards dark-skinned people working in our country. My friend is light-skinned and I am dark-skinned. The friend said, go back to where you come from, as I was not born here. And I then said, quote, I pay more taxes than you, which was hurtful to the friend because they had lost their job. I am ashamed that I was cruel, and I wish I had been more direct about feeling fear, sadness, anger, and confusion. And so the question is, though, the patient obviously it's hard to see the friend's truth when the friend says, go back to where you come from, right?
Yeah, so another example that we've asked on, I suppose you have someone, say a gay therapist, and the patient doesn't know that, and then makes some disparaging remark about gays.
Sure,
with
right.
some horrible,
right. It could be a patient doing it, a friend doing it. I mean, it's probably different, but yeah.
Jewish people,
sure.
Or Swedish people,
something
or
that
Irish people, or Mexican
you do not
immigrants.
agree with from a values perspective, right?
And so you're shocked and horrified by what the person is saying.
And the patient, the person writing in is saying it's very hard for me then to disarm that, to see the other person's truth, right?
Yeah.
And he says, truths I can see. The world becomes simpler when we only mix with people who look like us. Resources should be the inheritance of those born in a country, not forcibly shared with outsiders. Fewer people in a country might mean more jobs, power, and money. So he's actually doing a good job trying to think in his mind, like, how could I disarm what the other person is saying? But I feel disgusted to think like this. Yeah. Is this the death of the ego that's the cost of communication? Or am I completely lost track in empathy? So he's asking for help with that.
Yeah. And I've chosen a pseudonym.
Right, because I'm shy about how open I've already been. Right, so no name here.
Well, I think kudos to this person whose name we won't say.
Yeah.
They're calling it alter ego.
Okay, we'll call them alter ego.
And I think, when I first developed these techniques, or some of them I learned, when I was attending Beck's seminars, I thought about them really deeply and raised similar questions. And I think that's both a fun thing to do and part of the process of learning. You can always express respect to another person if that's what you want to do. You see, you have to make a decision before you can use the 5 secrets. If your goal is to improve your relationship with this person, or if rather you want to fight with them or argue with them or put them down as you did, that's what most humans do most of the time, and that's why the human race is not in very good shape. But an inspiring example of that was, I don't know if we've talked about it, this Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you know about him? He wrote some books, Letters and Papers from Prison, and Prisoner for God. And he was a Lutheran minister in Germany. That's how I found out about it, because my father was a Lutheran minister. And he was imprisoned by the Nazis because he wouldn't give in to the Nazi line. But he was also very well known, and so they wanted to arrest him and kill him or get rid of him, because they didn't want people disagreeing, especially people who were highly respected. And they treated him pretty brutally, and they threw him in prison, put shackles on him, and he had to, when there were bombings going on, he had to put a bucket over his head. And they took him out on 3 occasions and said, if you don't endorse the Nazi propaganda, they put him in front of a firing squad, and said, if you don't endorse the Nazi way of thinking, we're going to kill you, 3, 2, 1, and then they use fake bullets, just to terrify him, and they did that twice. But what he did, and the Nazi guards were very brutal, but he made the decision to treat them with respect. And so when they would put the shackles on him, he would say, thank you. And they would say, well, how are you saying, thank you? Throw some 4-letter words at him. And he said, well, I do not agree with the Nazism. I don't respect that political approach, but I respect you as a human being. And I know that you're doing your job, and you feel you're doing a good job, and I'm thanking you for that. So he decided, to treat these people with respect. And then what happened is they started liking him, and they began to smuggle in paper and pen so he could begin writing. And then they smuggled them out for him.
Yeah.
And they were then published in these, I guess there's 2 books, maybe more, Letters and Papers from Prison and Prisoner for God. And so that's a decision you can make. And sadly, then they took him out a 3rd time and actually executed him.
Yeah.
So he couldn't save his life.
Right.
And so in this case, you know, if you have a friend there and you can say what you're saying is, it hurts me a lot and it's painful to me, particularly because I like you and respect you. And I think it sounds like the person is a friend and you know, I consider you a friend but it sounds like you've had bad experiences with dark-skinned people, or you've had really strong feelings that, you know, maybe dark-skinned people are abnormal or bad in some way. Can you tell me what your thinking is? And you know, and then show yourself to be willing to listen and show support. Now, a lot of listeners right now about to be going, gag, you know, I don't want to do that. I want to put these people down and make them enemies. And you have every right to do that. Right. But what I have found personally, I give a lot of personal examples, is that the people who, I mean, in a way, the person, it's probably a stretch, was trusting you a certain amount to make this aggressive, hostile comment. And I found in my own life that the people are the most hostile to me. And believe me, there have been a lot of them. I mean, I get thousands of emails. I'd say 99% of them are really positive, but 1% of them are just really abusive and hostile. Yeah. And I've, like, someone was just busting me over my podcast or my blogs, this woman, and she just told me what a horrible human being I was, and I can't remember criticisms, but they were very powerful and extreme. And then I started disarming her and expressing respect and saying I do make a lot of mistakes, and I, you know, I'm learning from you and growing. And then she really suddenly softened. And then the odd thing is, I got an email with her saying that she was a graduate student in social work or clinical psychology or something, and she asked if she could come to Stanford and study with me. It was incredible.
Turning an enemy into a friend, right? With disarming and inquiry and stroking. So I mean, again, there are a couple things you're saying, David, which is, one is for the audience to know you don't have to choose to see the truth in what someone else says, right? It's totally your choice. You can choose to argue or disagree or defriend the person, right? In this case, the person who's writing in, again, I have so much admiration and respect for actually wanting to figure out how to be close to someone who says, go back to where you've come from, right? Yeah. And to do that not from a place of weakness or groveling, but like, how do I do this in kind of a respectful way where I'm also showing myself respect? And I think his question, even more specifically, I mean, David, you're talking about, you know, showing respect and kindness and inquiry, right? Asking, you know, can you tell me more about that? He's even saying, how can I find truth in what he's saying? And so I suppose if the person says, you know, go back to where you've come from, if he's really looking to disarm that, he could certainly start with what you said, you know, gosh, I feel really hurt by that and taken aback, especially coming from someone like you who I really care about and who I consider a good friend. At the same time, you know, I guess there's some truth to what you're saying. And I'm borrowing what this person said in their email, you know, the world is simpler when we only mix with people who look like us, right? I mean, this is what he's saying he's pulled, or maybe there would be more resources for you if I were not here. I'm only trying to understand the world through your eyes as much as it actually like pains me to do so.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
And can you tell me more so I can understand more what your perspective is? And also one other thing I would say is, like, I am really surprised to hear this from you because I consider you a friend, and I'm wondering if maybe there's something that I've done or said that's really hurt you.
That's good.
And that you're actually attacking me with this sort of generalization about my race, when in fact maybe it'd be helpful if you just told me what it is that I've done in particular that's hurt you so badly, because this is kind of a pretty big attack.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right.
And then to add one more thing, even now you could turn it to your advantage to go back to your friend and talk about the death of the ego. Yeah. This is your death of the ego. You say you were ashamed.
Yeah.
And so you could go back to your friend and say, after I talked to you, I felt so ashamed. I feel I was cruel, and I wasn't considering the fact that you had just lost your job.
Right. Here I am working and acting like I'm better than you because I'm paying taxes, and you've just lost your job. That was really insensitive.
Yeah, and that kind of proved to you, that dark-skinned people are kind of, should go back to Africa because I was putting you down and hurting you rather than showing love and support. And could we talk about it some more? Isn't that neat?
Absolutely. Right. So what's so cool about this is that even with something that many of us think is disgusting, revolting. Right? Exactly. Like racism, like if we want to be the bigger person, we can actually try to step into the shoes of the other person, imagine how they might be thinking and feeling, and do that, but still talk about our own feelings, which
still
makes
have
it so
integrity.
that we're not being a doormat. Yeah, exactly. Still have integrity.
The decision is, and you can even say I'm feeling kind of angry, and the question is not to be angry or not, but to share your anger in a loving way or attack with your anger. And given that decision, 9 out of 10 humans will want to attack and put the other person down. Let's go back to our list here. Let's see. Okay, here somebody says, this is Ron Fox. I'm going to like you, Ron, and Milad. I don't know what liking is, but I'm supposed to click on it. So I'm going to click on these.
It's the opposite of rejecting you, let's put it that way.
I've read all of your books for the general public and have gotten a lot out of them. Would there be any benefit to my reading Tools, Not Schools of Therapy? That's my psychotherapy ebook, which you can get an order form on my website, feelinggood.com. Or would it likely go over my head since it was written for therapists? Do you want to try an answer to that one, Jill?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is written for therapists. It has lots of examples of, working with patients, right? My own feeling actually is that the book that I like the best for learning the different methods, if you're a patient, is When Panic Attacks, actually, because that's where you have laid out all the different methods. I don't know. The question is, would it be advantageous for a patient to read Tools, Not Schools?
It's written at a simple level. I always write at the 5th grade level, unless I'm writing for scientific journals, and then I write at the 6th or 7th grade level. But I try to keep it simple and understandable, so you might enjoy the. It's a fun.
I mean, it's great. It has tons of stories. It has David's voice throughout, so it's an enjoyable read either way, right?
Yeah, and there's exercises you can do while you're reading it. And here's a question here from Avi, AVI. Your books, Feeling Good and When Panic Attacks, have been very helpful for me in solving lifelong issues. I was wondering if you ever wrote about how to deal with feelings of shame. In Feeling Good, there are chapters devoted to anger and guilt, which are very effective in tackling the cognitive side of those feelings, and I was hoping for something similar with shame. I can't thank you enough for writing these books. I really appreciate that, Avi, as well as the many kind emails so many of you write in almost pretty much on a daily basis, I would have to say. I made a video that actually Jill was in, as well as Angela Crum from the Feeling Good Institute. About 5 years ago, we did it in the living room of my house, and we had opportunity to record some actual video therapy sessions with 2 professional cameramen. It was a commercial quality video, and one of the videos is called Overcoming Toxic Shame, the story of Melanie. And it was a totally mind-bending, about a 2-hour therapy session, and walked a colleague through a phone call that she had gotten from a colleague who said, I'm calling to express condolences over the death of your mother-in-law. And then Melanie, who was the patient, the real patient, became flooded with panic and shame and depression. And in the video, she said, David, I have to confess, I'm not ashamed. I'm not upset because of the death of my mother-in-law. I had to tell her that my mother-in-law had actually not died. It's my ex-mother-in-law. And to tell you the truth, Dr. Burns, I have 2 ex-mother-in-laws because I'm in my 3rd marriage. And I am so ashamed. And so you see the session unfolding. She's ashamed because she's a therapist. She does the couples counseling in her church as volunteer work for her church. She's a highly renowned Bay Area therapist. She's the head of counseling at one of our local universities. She has her own internship program, but she's been hiding this for 10 years. She's in her 3rd happy marriage, but she's had 10 years of shame for fear someone will find out that she's had 2 failed marriages. And you see exactly how we walked her through that. It's a totally beautiful video. It's beautifully filmed because it's all this high quality cameras. It's beautifully edited, and you can watch it straight through. Mm-hmm. Or there's another version where you stop and do exercises, and I wrote a workbook that you can do the exercises in the workbook while you're watching the video. I think it's one of the most dramatic live therapy sessions ever filmed. Well, the reason I'm mentioning this is a colleague who paid for that and set it up marketed a few hundred of these videos and then kind of ran out of steam on it. So I was able to buy his remaining inventory of about 600 of them. So I'm going to see if I can set up a store on my website, mm-hmm. Feeling Good. And this will be the first product that I'll be selling. And it's great for the general public or for therapists as well. Any other comments about that thing?
No, I guess, can I see that? I think it was asking what do you do to work with shame? Is that what, yeah. And
There's 2 pieces.
I see. So there are chapters, I was hoping for something similar with shame, right? I mean, one thing that David would always say is, the way we start working with anything, right, is figuring out, like, let's say taking out a daily mood log. What are the thoughts that are actually driving the shame? Shame to one person looks very different than shame to another. What are those thoughts? And then we use a variety of cognitive strategies, many of the same ones that would work on other emotions, right, will work on shame. And then I'll just throw out a few ideas, right? Because we oftentimes.
And by the way, her thoughts were things like, she'll tell other people who will judge me, my reputation will be ruined,
right?
People will lose respect for me, stuff like that.
Patients won't want to work with me. They won't have faith in me as a couples therapist if they know that I've had 3 failed marriages.
2 failed marriages.
2 failed marriages, sorry, and 1 really good one, actually.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, so exercises like externalization of voices. We did the feared fantasy.
Double
this is
standard.
Someone who knows, right, the double standard. And then we can also do self-disclosure. We can do shame attacking, right?
Yeah.
So for someone who's familiar with many of the tools, these are just a few.
The same tools.
But you see us bringing them all to life on this video, right?
Yeah. And another thing is the positive reframing, the paradoxical agenda setting. What does the shame show about Melanie?
Right.
That's positive and awesome. And what are some benefits to her in feeling shame and depressed and anger and all these other emotions, and
that's like, for example, for her, feeling ashamed showed kind of how much respect she had for the sanctity of marriage, right?
Yes,
I remember it was a lovely session.
It was really incredible. I think it was one of the first times that recovery has been captured in video live when it happened.
Yeah.
Also, during the session, she had a total relapse. It's the first time relapse has ever been captured. And then a second dramatic recovery.
Yes, right.
So, and then there were a lot of philosophical points that came out too. It was really just so cool.
There's a question here. What are some ways for new therapists to stop worrying about their clients? And my answer to that question would be, to use the same methods that we use with our patients who worry, right? So if a therapist is feeling worried about their clients, if it were me, and because of course all of us have these worries that come up from time to time, I would take out a daily mood log and I would identify, what am I worried about? What are my anxious thoughts? And then I would use a variety of cognitive strategies to challenge those anxious thoughts. The other piece that we keep talking about, this positive reframing, is I would also accept that part of being a good therapist means worrying about my patients from time to time, right? Thinking about them, being concerned, that it shows kind of my high standards. It shows how much I care about being a good therapist. And I need to ask myself, how much would I want to dial down that worry, right? I wouldn't probably want to get rid of it altogether. Sometimes when I feel worried about a patient, it drives me to consult with David. It drives me to read a new resource, right? To try a new method, something like that.
Another angle on that is we had a session in our Tuesday group a couple of weeks ago on the prediction and prevention of suicide and violence. And we talked about, one of the things that therapists worry about is when you have a suicidal patient and you're not sure that the patient is trustworthy and safe and reliable. And we talked about how to do a suicide interview. There's one in the Easy Diagnostic system that therapists can order also if you're interested. And it shows the questions to ask if someone has elevated suicidal impulses at the initial evaluation, and how to decide whether or not it's safe to take on a particular patient. So those are some considerations as well. You want to do this one?
Sure.
Or should we?
Well, there's a quick answer. I wanted to respond to one thing someone said here. Marty Stock said, we'll like him. I'll be David here. Let's like you. And
like Ron, too, even though we haven't read
we have to read his question. But okay. I wish that some of your meant for professionals videos and texts were available too and affordable for us interested ordinary folks. I've gotten a tremendous amount gleaning self-help from your work. I just want to remind Marty that I think David generously is producing all of this free podcast. So many of my patients, which I would consider the general public, you have access to tons of free material, right? So
on that website, there's probably at least 2,000 pages of
there's David loves
material.
To write and stick it on the website. So there's tons of free things, and all the self-help books are free, right?
What's free?
No, sorry, not free, but affordable. Sorry. But this is asking. Sorry.
The books are free or inexpensive.
Inexpensive, right?
And then we've got
like under $20.
And then the Feeling Good podcasts are kind of like that. That's like an audio version, but better than my book, the psychotherapy ebook. And it's totally free. And we've got so far, I think we're up to like 80 podcasts so far, so we've got almost 80 hours of...
And I actually didn't say that to be overly promotional, but rather to respond to this question that was saying, is anything available, affordable for the ordinary folk?
Most of what
so
I
a lot of it is affordable.
Most is free. And on the Melanie video, I'm trying to figure out how to price it, but I'm going to price it, very, very reasonably.
And then also on our website, feelinggoodinstitute.com, if you go to For Therapists, there's a lot of trainings that we offer, and monthly we offer free webinars too.
Now we have a very knowledgeable listener, Rob D. Gregorio from Boston. He's usually very critical, so we have to brace ourselves for his comment. Do you want to read it?
Sure. So you just said that comment to the person with a racist friend, the one that we just did some role playing with, about the decision not being whether or not to be angry, but whether or not to attack versus share your feelings, was pure gold to me. I never give myself permission to be angry.
And that's so neat. And Rob always makes the wise and beautifully stated comments. I hear from you, Rob, probably roughly once a week on average. And boy, it's whenever I see an email coming from Rob, my heart jumps for joy for two reasons. First, because you really listen and pay attention and pull out the morsels that of potential value there and whatever we were talking about on the Feeling Good podcast, but also because your comments are so beautifully and clearly written. And then I also think the feedback you gave on our sessions with Melanie and the tenderness and kindness that you expressed, bringing in the spiritual aspect of what she was doing. She was the one we worked with who was just diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And if any of you haven't listened to those, the podcast, The Treatment with Melanie, or with Marilyn, you definitely want to catch that.
Oh, Tyann is asking, do we have the link to the Melanie video and workbok? But you don't yet, right?
No, I have to. I'm kind of elderly and lame, and learning new things I avoid it a little bit. but they have a fantastic help group on WordPress, and I have to take maybe 2 or 3 hours and ask the help people, how do I set up a store on my website? And they will show me how to do it. I'm sure it's not that hard. And then I just have to get some containers at the post office that I can put them in to ship them to people, and then I'll be able to be in business there. And I hope a lot of you do get that Melanie video, because the teaching content is fantastic, but the healing and inspirational aspect is also fantastic. And then again, to show to people who are disbelievers, it really is possible to cause someone who's been suffering and struggling for years to get a complete, more than a complete elimination of symptoms, just to go from tears, as she was at the beginning of the video, to just euphoria at the end. We're not talking about just recovery from depression or partial improvement. We're talking more about enlightenment or something even more profound than that.
There's one more question here. Should we respond to it? Because up here, sorry, wait, I lost it. Rand Smith said, "Hi, Dr. Burns, Levitt, and Dr. Fabrice. Outside of Team CBT, what new research, tools, etc., are you looking to or excited for in psychotherapy?" And I can respond a little bit. So I would say a couple things. So David and I were at ABCT together, and I was able to catch up.
Tell them what ABCT is.
Sorry, Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. It used to be called AABT, but now it's ABCT, in San Diego. And there are a couple things that I saw there that I thought were interesting. One is that there's actually a lot more research now, thankfully, on what's called routine outcome monitoring, right? The importance of using measurement in therapy, which we've been thinking for a long time, but I'm happy to see there's a lot of data now that's showing that, if you're using measurement with all of your patients, it's leads to reduced dropout rates and improved outcomes, and it's starting to be mandated and things like that. I've also seen, I think, the integrating compassion, like using compassion-based methods in therapy, which some people are starting to research, I think is really exciting. I'm trying to think if there were other things. There's a lot of process research that's going on now that I think is exciting. Actually, I'll say one more thing, and then we can move on to something else. I think David, for a very long time, has been not excited about treatment manuals, right? Because they're so kind of rigid, and they're treating the disorder rather than the individual. And although I've actually was kind of trained on treatment manuals and feel like they can be sort of useful from a methods perspective, I'm excited that the field is moving away from doing studies of manuals for disorders and more trying to do more like process research, figuring out pieces of treatments that work.
Yeah, and I told you about my comment on Stephen Hayes' stuff?
No, I was about to say, I bet that's where you and Steve Hayes and Stefan Hoffman merge. So no, do you want to speak to that? Because I think it's nice for viewers to see that, no, we're not just saying you must do this, this, and this. We're interested in kind of what else is going on out there, right?
Yeah, well, I was asked to comment at the Evolution of Psychotherapy Conference to be a commenter on Stephen Hayes' paper, which is based on his new book. And I had it here, but I gave it to Kyle Jones.
Oh, I would like to read it.
Yeah,
I'll have to get it from Kyle.
He's the fellow who created ACT therapy,
right?
But he is like a rock star.
Yes.
He's a showman.
Yes.
And he mumbles on stage. And he has slides
awesome.
with about 1,000 words on every slide. So you have no idea what's on his slide. You have no idea what the guy's talking about. Right. But it's so charming.
It is.
It's so awesome.
He is. He's awesome.
And I was able to find so much in what he had to say that's so compatible with our stuff.
Right.
Like he says, let's do validated methods rather than validated schools of therapy.
Exactly.
Like, what are the methods that help people?
Absolutely.
And that's what we're into.
Totally.
Like, paradoxical agenda setting is a method with potential, tremendous,
like a modular approach, right?
And so we just made tremendous friendships there.
That's awesome.
It was just I couldn't believe it. It was so great. And he's not possessive. He's not pushing for schools of therapy.
Totally.
So people should teach for free.
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot of really neat stuff. I got something in the mail yesterday or Friday from some Stanford scientist who has some startup. He has some new device they've created that you can point it at anything and can do the infrared and get super exact measurements on heat or something like that. And I don't know, he must have thought I was in the School of Electronics.
Right.
He's saying, can you think of any applications for this new invention? And, but it looked like some mind-blowing new thing. And I said, well, could we use it in psychotherapy? Maybe
the idea being we're very open here, right?
I said we have these dramatic changes in mood.
Could we measure emotion?
Showing on a person and tell.
Cool.
And so I haven't heard back. It just said that
like an emotion thermometer.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
That would be amazing.
So
that would be really cool. I'm just noticing the time.
Oh yeah, what is the time?
It is 4:01.
Oh my gosh. We had so much that we didn't get to today.
I know.
My goodness. Well, I think we're going to stay on time.
I think we got to the questions on the screen. There was one more question about the death of the ego. That we didn't
should we just quickly do that?
Sure.
You mentioned Phil McCormick here.
Right.
He's one of our regulars, and he says you mentioned the death of the ego many times in your work. By the way, I had a huge new insight about death of the ego this week. We don't have time to go into it, but it
to be continued.
Yeah, I woke up with this huge new insight based on the philosophy of Wittgenstein, which is different from the Buddhist death of the ego. And I'm writing about it for my new book. It might be too intellectual for people, but I got sniped on it. And but anyway, this person says, is
it more or less a way of saying, tough shit, I totally accept myself?
Yeah, and that's not really what acceptance is. But to make a long story short, everything we teach has a healthy side and an unhealthy side. You can use these concepts to heal or to hurt. And acceptance is when you have the death of the ego, you can more readily accept criticisms, because you see people can only criticize your specific flaws. They can't criticize yourself because you have no self. But when your ego dies, it's like getting out of prison, and you don't have territory to defend anymore. And so you can hear what people are saying. Like if people criticize my writing, that's easy to agree with, because if my writing is turning somebody off, then it obviously needs
something to be improved there, right?
Absolutely. Same with my teaching. Same with my therapy. Same with our show here.
Right.
So you can actually, the death of the ego enables me to develop far more loving relationships with people, because I don't get into that defensive posture when criticized.
So I think that it's the tough shit, I totally accept myself sounds aggressive, whereas the death of the ego is like, I have nothing to lose. There's nothing, whatever you say about me, is likely to be true and accurate, and I'm willing to hear that and accept that. I don't have an ego to defend, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on those fabulous words, we'll end the broadcast. I look forward to seeing all of you next Sunday at 3 p.m. Thank you for your support. Remember to tell your friends, and then if you know any of the social media stuff, how to kind of spread kind of David and Jill virus around, so all these people from Russia and everyone.
Be careful what you wish for.
Start listening to the show.
I don't hack into our show and put mustaches on us.
Yeah, as the Buddha said, I don't know how to do that shit, so help us do it for us or show us what to do.
Right.
So anyway, thanks. Have a great week, everyone, and thanks again. Bye-bye.